We're now going to move to question time, and I call Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. President, my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. In response to a question from Senator Waters yesterday in relation to the explosion at Al Ali Arab Hospital in Gaza, which has resulted in further tragic loss of innocent lives, you correctly at the time noted that, quote, there are obviously conflicting reports about what has occurred. Overnight, President Biden has stated that, based on US information, it appears to be as a result of an errant rocket fired by a terrorist group in Gaza. And a spokesperson for the United States National Security Council further clarified that our current assessment, based on analysis of overhead imagery, intercepts and open-source information, is that Israel is not responsible for the explosion at the hospital in Gaza. Minister, what is Australia's assessment or understanding of responsibility for the tragic explosion at Al Ali Arab Hospital in Gaza?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Birmingham for the question, and I start first by again saying that we saw devastating loss of life, both in the heinous attacks on Israel by Hamas, and we've also seen tragic loss of life at the explosion at the hospital in Gaza. There has been clearly a devastating loss of civilian life, and I want to reiterate what I said yesterday and what the Prime Minister said. Every innocent life matters, whether Israeli or Palestinian. Express our thoughts, that our thoughts are with those killed or injured and their loved ones, and that the protection of civilian life must come first, and that respect for international humanitarian law is paramount. We join with others in doing so. My response is to the question about the attack itself. Obviously, this is a conflict zone. Assessments are difficult. I think it is probably most appropriate, again, to refer to the US National Security Council words which Senator Birmingham referenced. A statement was made that while we continue to collect information, our current assessment is that Israel is not responsible for the explosion at the hospital in Gaza. What I would say, however, is that we recognise the great distress that so many in the Australian community are feeling at this time, from the Jewish community, and also from the Palestinian community and the Muslim community more generally. And I think everybody looking at what has occurred, and most particularly or most recently in the deaths of civilians at the hospital, would agree this is
Thank you, Minister.
Tragic,
the time for answering has expired. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Minister, are you aware of any progress towards the release of Israeli hostages that continue to be held by Hamas some 12 days after their brutal and bloody assault on Israel? And further, are you aware of any progress to ensure humanitarian supplies, including food, water and medicines, are made available to innocent citizens, civilians in Gaza?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Wong.
In relation, thank you, President. Thank you to Senator Birmingham. In relation to the first question, I have no update to provide to the Senate in relation to the situation regarding hostages. I simply indicate that Australia has privately and publicly called for the release of hostages, and I'm sure we are joined by all in this chamber. In relation to humanitarian assistance, this remains challenging, as has the related issue of foreign nationals and civilians being permitted to exit Gaza by the limited number of crossings into the Gaza Strip which are available. We have obviously seen on many days indications this might happen. I spoke to the United Nations coordinator for the Middle East peace process about this just yesterday. I note some statements overnight
from President. Thank you, Minister. The time has expired. Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. I refer to statements also made overnight by ASIO Director-General Mike Burgess regarding people from the neo-Nazi cohort and the Sunni violent extremist cohort consuming and commenting on extremist or insightful material. What steps is the government taking to ensure Australians of Jewish faith, Islamic faith or of any background are safe and are able to feel that they are safe and welcome in our country?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Well, the first thing that we all must do, the government is doing, but all of us must do, is recognise that our words matter. Our words matter, and this is a moment where feelings and attitudes in our country are affected, obviously, by the events we are seeing, but also by the words of leaders, by the words of politicians. So the government is working to engage with members of the Jewish community, with members of the Palestinian communities and the Muslim community more broadly. I think it was very important, and I thank the opposition for their support of a bipartisan motion on this. We may have different political views, but there are times when it is very important that the parties of government speak together, because our multicultural community, our diverse community, which is hurting, which is really hurting, really need politicians to be able to speak as one on the key issues that matter, and I thank you for that.
Senator Marielle Smith.
My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Can the Minister update the Senate on the situation in the Middle East following the abhorrent attacks on Israel by Hamas?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Smith for her question, and I know so many Australians are deeply concerned over the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. We welcome the statement from the Israeli Prime Minister's office following President Biden's request that Israel will not prevent humanitarian assistance entering Gaza from Egypt. We welcome the United States' commitment to provide $100 million in humanitarian support, and we understand large-scale international humanitarian aid is on standby at the Rafah border crossing, ready for distribution once the border is open. This includes the supplies of our trusted partners such as UNICEF have been able to ready thanks to Australia's initial $10 million humanitarian commitment. I would also like to acknowledge the generous contribution from the Minderoo Foundation, led by Andrew Nicola Forrest, who have committed a matching donation of $10 million in humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza. I want to say the government is deeply concerned by violent protests across the Middle East, including in Lebanon. I want to be very clear. The government has serious concerns for the security situation in Lebanon. To Australians in Lebanon, please know that we have today upgraded Australia's travel advice for Lebanon to level 4. Do not travel. This means if you are an Australian in Lebanon, you should consider leaving now if it is safe to do so. I again repeat, if you are an Australian in Lebanon, you should consider leaving now if it is safe to do so. Commercial departure options remain available, but this may change with little notice during a crisis. And again, I encourage people to monitor the Smart Traveller website for the latest advice.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Marielle Smith, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for your response. Can you update the Senate on efforts to help Australians who want to leave Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories?
Minister.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Smith. Well, overnight, an Australian government-assisted departure flight landed in Sydney with 252 passengers on board, including 126 Australians. A Royal Australian Air Force flight also landed in Dubai from Tel Aviv, carrying 59 passengers. Subject to security conditions, we are planning an assisted departure flight from Tel Aviv to Dubai today. We strongly encourage Australians who want to leave to consider this flight and do not wait for another option. As I've said in this place this week, we have had a lot of empty seats on flights. This will be our last flight for the foreseeable future. I again repeat, today's flight will be our last flight for the foreseeable future. We continue to assist Australians who wish to leave the occupied Palestinian territories, including working to secure an Australian safe passage out of Gaza. I appreciate this is extremely difficult, and we understand how dangerous the situation is, and we are working very hard with partners on this.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Marielle Smith, second supplementary.
Can the Minister explain to the Senate the government's role internationally and at home?
Minister.
Thank you. In the context of the crisis unfolding, obviously one of our key priorities is to work with other countries to prevent this conflict from spilling over. And yesterday I spoke about this. That is also why we are so clear in our call that civilian lives must come first and respect for humanitarian law is paramount. That is why our priority is supporting Australians in Israel, in the West Bank and Gaza, and in securing a humanitarian corridor to Gaza for the safe departure of civilians. And here at home, our role as a government, and I would say our role as a Senate, is to do all we can to keep our country unified, to make sure our community feels heard. And I ask all senators to be part of that effort. There are times where it is important that we actually put aside partisan politics and differences of views, because there is a greater purpose to what we are doing.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development and Local Government, Senator Watt. Did the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government meet with Mr Alan Joyce on or about the 23rd of January 2023?
Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Senator Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator McKenzie. I answered a very similar question from Senator McKenzie yesterday, in which I said that Minister King has already put on the record that she did meet with the former CEO of Qantas, as well as the CEO of Virgin, and that is her usual practice, is to speak to the CEOs of major airlines on a regular basis. So I know that this is something that Senator McKenzie is determined to keep asking questions on, no matter how many times they are answered. So I can only repeat the answers that I gave yesterday. Senator McKenzie, of course, is entitled to ask whatever questions that she wants. We will continue providing the same answers, as we have done now for probably the best part of 3 months. I note that overnight, or in the last 24 hours, Minister King has also made the point that the government will be reactivating ACCC monitoring of air passenger services that were intended by the former government to end on the 30th of June this year. So the former government actually had agreed to the finalisation of that in June, but of course they're much wiser in opposition than they ever were in government. Maybe I take the interjection, not a lot wiser. And I also note that the 12 ACCC reports that occurred under the previous government found declining service standards by the airlines and higher prices by airlines, but were not acted on. So again, it seems to have taken the opposition losing government to actually start caring about any of these issues and continue asking questions which have been answered many times.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McKenzie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Of course she's meeting with the CEOs of both our major airlines. One would hope she would be. But I asked about on or about the 23rd of January, and that hasn't been answered. Minister, next week, as its estimates, you will be appearing before the Rural and Regional Affairs and Transport Committee on Minister King's behalf. Will you undertake to seek the relevant information from Minister King's office so that you can provide the committee with a satisfactory answer to what is actually a very straightforward question?
Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Minister Watt.
As Senator McKenzie knows, it's always my practice to assist the opposition in answering questions, and I'm actually looking forward to estimates next week. I think most people have worked out that many of our ministers enjoy appearing estimates. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads here. We've got a lot to say next week at estimates. We've got a lot to remind the opposition of about their time in government as well. But the matter that Senator McKenzie is asking about, unfortunately, I will not be able to represent Minister King at the infrastructure estimates because I'll be representing Minister O'Neill in Home Affairs estimates. So I look forward to seeing Senator Scarr and a number of others there. But Senator Chisholm will do a fantastic job answering those questions.
Please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie.
Well, yes, actually that's what I was looking for, because as funny as Mr Watt
why are you
thinks
on your
he
feet?
is—
Do you have a point of order? No. Minister, did you want to add to your answer?
So, as I was saying, Senator Chisholm, I know, will do a terrific job representing Minister King, and Senator Brown will be doing that as well.
Minister Watt. Senator McKenzie, please don't call out point of order as you were getting to your feet. Senator McKenzie.
Relevance. The government, whoever's representing Minister King, will they be prepared to go to Minister King and have the question answered?
Senator McKenzie, you did ask specifically in relation to Minister Watt, and he has informed the chamber that, in fact, he will be elsewhere. Minister, did you wish to continue your answer?
So I'm sure that Senator Chisholm and Senator Brown will do a much better job of answering questions than Senator McKenzie ever did about sports rorts and various other matters.
The time for answering has expired. Senator McKenzie, second supplementary.
Absolutely. Prior to the election, the Prime Minister promised to bring transparency and integrity back to politics, claiming that only a Labor government would deliver on that promise. How are Australians expected to believe that you've kept your promise when the Albanese Labor government won't even be upfront about who a minister met, let alone reveal the reasoning behind major decisions impacting our economy and the Australian travelling public?
Thank you. Before I call the minister, I remind those on my right that repeated interjections are disorderly. Minister Watt.
Well, you do know it's Thursday question time when Senator McKenzie, of all people, wants to talk about transparency in government. Have you still got those spreadsheets? Are they still covered? I mean, seriously, we're going to take lectures from Senator McKenzie or anyone over that side of the chamber about transparency. Senator Cash has got a lot to say now, of course. Of course, Senator Cash was the Attorney-General who didn't introduce a National Anti-Corruption Commission. That's how committed Senator Cash was committed to transparency. Senator Cash, of course, refused to cooperate with the police investigation. That's how committed she was to transparency in office, and now they want to lecture us.
Order. Senator McKenzie.
So, Minister...
just a moment, Senator McKenzie. Please resume your seat. Order across the chamber. I have a senator on her feet. Order. Senator Cash. When I call order across the chamber, it also applies to you. Senator McKenzie.
Minister Watt is reflecting on other senators in this chamber, and he has been called to account several times previously by not just yourself but other presidents, and it is absolutely against the standing orders, this continual behaviour. When he feels under attack, he's just got to make it personal every time.
Thank you, Senator Cash. I don't believe that Minister Watt was directly being using inappropriate language, but I will seek the advice of the clerk. Minister Wong.
I have a submission on the point of order. I think there is a distinction between a personal attack and a criticism that goes to someone's behaviour as a public official.
Order.
The latter is not a personal attack, no matter what others might say.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Wong. The clerk has confirmed my understanding, and that is, I don't think, and also advised by the clerk, that the language breached the standards. But I will continue to listen closely because I'm well aware of the rulings I've made in the past. Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Minister Watt.
I'm not sure why it is that Senator McKenzie and others think that it's appropriate to come in and accuse various Labor ministers of lacking integrity and lacking transparency, but when it's pointed out their own record that seems to be against the rules. It's a double standard that seems to apply on these matters.
Order.
As I say, this government has delivered on transparency. We've introduced a National Anti-Corruption Commission. Senator Farrell is doing work around electoral donations. There are any number of examples we can give. Unfortunately, Senator McKenzie just is never happy.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Waters.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Special Minister of State, Senator Farrell. The Liberals and the No campaign unashamedly used and amplified dis- and misinformation in their campaign to defeat the Voice referendum. It was straight out of Donald Trump's playbook.
Order.
Until we have truth in political advertising laws, those tactics can be used again, likely on migration. The next election would be a horror show of scare campaigns and misinformation. Polling released today shows that 87% of Australians support truth in political advertising laws. Does the government want to confront the issue of misleading political advertising, Or is avoiding that and doing a deal with the Liberals on electoral changes more important to them?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and can I thank Senator Waters for her question. I've made it very clear, especially in respect of your last point, Senator Waters, that it's my intention to consult with all of the parties, including the Greens, about electoral reform. We do have a process in place. That process has announced an interim report, and you would be fully aware of many of the items that have been raised in that process. I intend to continue that consultation process with all of the parties, with a view to trying to get a consensus position on reforms to our electoral system. We know that a whole lot of things need to be done to increase transparency, and we know that a whole lot of things need to be done to limit expenditure by really rich Australians to buy election results. Now, in that process, we are going to give some consideration to the issue of truth in political advertising. I agree with you. I agree with you 100% about a lot of the messages that were sent out to the Australian people. But yeah, no. Well, no, it wouldn't. If it was to proceed, Senator Canavan, if it was to proceed, then it would not be me making those decisions. It would not be Senator. It certainly wouldn't be. I can tell you this, Senator Canavan. It certainly would not be you who would be making that.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Waters, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Minister, the government is reportedly in discussions with the Liberals on electoral reform, which has grave implications for the 1/3 of Australians that didn't vote for either of your parties. Around half the money Labor and Liberal receive is not disclosed. It's dark money that comes from exclusive cash for access events, donated through business forums as memberships and undisclosed sources. Will you close these major party loopholes, act on secret money, or will this cosy arrangement that protects the two old parties stay in place?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Waters for her first supplementary question. Look, I reject the premise of your question. I don't know how many times I can say it. I intend to have discussions with all of the parties about what electoral reform might look like. I have done it with you, Senator Waters, and I expect we'll be doing it again shortly. I've done it with Senator Pocock. I'll be very happy to do it with the Jackie Lambie network. I've done it with the Teals. In fact, I've done it with anybody who's asked to meet me to have a discussion about it.
Sharing the love, sharing the gun love.
No, I've even talked to Chris Ketter. Would you believe?
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister. Minister, the time. Order. Minister, the time for answering has expired. Senator Waters, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. What assurances can you give that Labor and the Liberal Party won't stitch up a secret deal that will give themselves more public money, keep the secret corporate slush funds in place and enable more misinformation in election campaigns? Will we end up with electoral reform or an electoral rort?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Waters, for your second supplementary question. Well, again, I reject the underlying implication in your question. The objective of this government is to bring about transparency in the Australian electoral process. Now, one of the ways which the committee has recommended we do that is, instead of having a $16,000 ceiling for disclosure of electoral donations, bring it down to $1,000. That will very significantly add to transparency in electoral processes. One of the other proposals, Senator Waters, is to have real-time donations so that any voter can know within, say, 7 days who has donated to the political candidate they are considering supporting.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Payman.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Aged Care, Senator Gallagher. The Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety found that unacceptable staffing levels in aged care homes had created horrific environments of substandard care. The final report recommended that registered nurses be required on site in residential aged care homes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It also recommended the introduction of minimum care time from registered nurses, enrolled nurses and personal care workers. Could the Minister update the Senate on the Albanese government's progress in implementing these recommendations?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President, and I thank Senator Payman for that question on the important issue of aged care across the community. The Aged Care Royal Commission's final report told a shocking story of neglect, inaction and a lack of ambition to plan for growing demand in the aged care sector. It called for urgent action to help a sector that was in crisis. The Labor government recognises that aged care workers had to be at the foundation of our reform. Our aged care workers are the heart of the system, caring for vulnerable older Australians, and that's why the very first piece of legislation introduced by the Albanese government was a bill to require 24/7 nursing to make sure aged care residents could get the clinical care they required around the clock. This positive step forward was met by ridicule and criticism from those opposite, who ran an irresponsible year-long scare campaign that requiring more nurses in aged care would lead to the collapse of the aged care sector. But the 1st of July came and went, the sun is still in the sky, and our first set of data for the 24/7 nursing mandate revealed significant improvements. On average, there is a nurse on site 98% of the time, or 23.5 hours a day. 86% of all homes that reported data have a nurse 24/7, and the majority of remaining homes are extremely close to meeting the target. 2 months on, the data has continued to improve, with 88% of homes now having a registered nurse on site 24/7. The Royal Commission also recommended mandatory minimum care minutes, which took effect from the 1st of October. Data collected from minimum care minutes came into effect show that older Australians are receiving an additional 1.8 million minutes of care every single day under the Albanese government.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Payman, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Can the Minister advise how the government is working to ensure the growing aged care workforce is adequately skilled to deliver high-quality care?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, because the skills and making sure we have a skilled workforce to deliver the high-quality care is a critical component of the aged care reforms and the system that we inherited, a system that had been titled Neglect by the Royal Commission in its first interim report. And we are steadily improving the quality of care and the skills and training and encouraging more people into the aged care workforce based on the work that we're doing through the skills program, through Minister O'Connor, through the leadership of the Prime Minister and the states and territories. We now have 7,869 Australians enrolled in Certificate 3 in individual support to work in aged care or disability care, and another almost 8,500 Australians have enrolled in the Diploma of Nursing. There is more work to do, but having a skilled workforce is essential to making sure that we can improve the quality of care for those elderly Australians who rely on residential aged care services.
Senator Payman, second supplementary.
Can the Minister inform the Senate how the government's work to build the aged care workforce is helping to deliver Labor's promise to lift the standard of aged care in Australia?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, and I thank Senator Payman. The government's desire is to work with the aged care sector to deliver on all of these important reforms. And I met with a group of ACT aged care providers in the last couple of weeks to talk about what they're seeing post these changes. They're seeing stability in their staff, they're seeing less turnover, they're seeing more applications for vacancies in the sector and less agency contracts, which means more continuity of care for residents in residential aged care who are seeing
Ruston
and benefiting. I don't know what Senator Ruston doesn't like about improved aged care services, but she has been interjecting. She has been interjecting and complaining about the improvements that we have made, things that they never did, couldn't find the room, couldn't find the investments, couldn't find the human capital to actually invest in that system. We're doing it and you're still complaining about it. Residents are seeing improved care, and that's because of the work that the minister has been doing.
Senator Ruston, your constant interjections are disorderly, and I'm asking you to discontinue, and Senator Colbeck. Senator Tyrrell.
Thank you, President. My question is for the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Sorry about that. I'm sure nobody in this chamber needs convincing as to the value that staff bring to each of our offices. It's not a secret this place would fall to ruin without them. Personal staffing allocations are determined entirely by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister decides how many staff he or she gets, along with how many staff the opposition gets and any crossbencher. The Prime Minister of the day can also decide to give staff to individual parliamentarians or take staff away. The Prime Minister may provide additional staff for valid reasons or for invalid reasons. They might also threaten to cut a parliamentarian's staff allocation for any reason they may choose. Does the Minister agree that this discretionary power, which is not subject to disallowance and is not required to be published anywhere, represents a possible corruption risk?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Gallagher.
Yeah. Thank you, and I thank Senator Tyrrell for the question. This falls across Minister Farrell and my portfolios as we're implementing the Set the Standard review and the implementations from that. I think it has been long-standing practice that the allocation of personal staff is a decision that's made by the Prime Minister of the day. I understand that has always been the case. I would, however, say to Senator Tyrrell, and we do acknowledge how hard our staff work in this building for any member of parliament, any senator. The demands, particularly in a sitting week, in estimates, are particularly onerous in the hours that we expect them to work, which is why we've been so keen to put in place the recommendations of the Jenkins Review into providing better support for staff through through the measures that we've introduced and legislation that passed this parliament last session. So the PWSS, as an independent statutory authority, commenced on the 1st of October this year. One of the recommendations, I think, from the MOPS review, actually, was to have a review that the PWSS, once established, should have do a resourcing review of members of Parliament's office. We have funded PWSS to the capacity that they are able to perform that review. I mean, the resourcing that they were provided through the budget allows them or provides them with the budget to do all of the things the legislation requires of them, but to act on that resourcing review. And I understand that is an immediate priority for the PWSS. So that will be a new piece of information that will be provided. I don't think that has been done before, and it will be independently managed by the PWSS under the rules that we have passed through this parliament.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Tyrrell, first supplementary.
Thank you. Can the Minister provide an example of any other field where one organisation in a competitive market is given the sole discretion to determine the extent to which its rivals can compete?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Gallagher.
Well, I'm not sure I'm in a position to answer that, but I just repeat the answer I gave to the first question. The allocation of personal staff, as far as I'm aware, has been at the discretion of the Prime Minister of the day. I know that members and independent senators have had discussions with the Prime Minister around allocation of those personal staff. In terms of the lack of transparency, which I think you'd raised, or the perceived lack of transparency around that you raised in your last question, I would point out that the details of those arrangements are published. They are tabled at every estimate sitting, as far as I can recall, through the Finance and Public Administration Committee. So the arrangements that are put in place are public and they are transparent and they are available to any member of Parliament or indeed those that follow the tabling of reports at Senate estimates.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell, second supplementary.
Thank you. Noting the current Prime Minister has reduced personal staff allocations for crossbenchers, the Minister surely agrees that Prime Ministers historically have not always afforded parliamentarians a reasonable allocation of staff. If that's the case, isn't there a role for an independent body to determine what's reasonable, to make sure it's done at arm's length, transparently and without prejudice?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Gallagher.
Well, I think the resourcing review is certainly at arm's length and it's independent, and it was a recommendation of the MOPS review, and this was an issue that was raised through that MOPS review. So I think that is absolutely appropriate. The government supports that work being done. We've resourced the PWSS so they are able to do that work. I understand it's a priority for the organisation. They're aware that this is an issue that has been raised through the Parliament, so I have no doubt that when that work is complete and that is available to people will be able to see the results of that. You know, I think let's see what that comes up with. It's an important piece of work that's been recognised, and I know it's been raised by a number of independent senators and crossbench senators in particular.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Little.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Mr Albanese's failed referendum campaign hurt our country, no matter how people voted. Members of the Prime Minister's hand-picked referendum working group suggested that voting no was based on a foundation of racism or stupidity. Prominent Yes advocates declared no voters were dinosaurs, wreckers or worse. 61% of Australians voted no, but Australians on both sides of it were hurt thanks to its mishandling. Is the Prime Minister going to make an apology to the Australian people, regardless of their vote, for his role in dividing our great nation?
Thank you, Senator Little. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Little.
Order.
I thank Senator Little for her question. And it is true, there were things said and done during the campaign which were hurtful. There were things done and said that particularly our First Nations people found hurtful. There were things done and said which—
Order.
There were things that were done and said which many Australians found hurtful, particularly people from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background, regardless of their views. We have seen a lot of pain, which is why the Prime Minister spoke about the importance of coming together on the night of the referendum when he accepted responsibility, when he said very clearly to Australians, you know, we're neither yes voters nor no voters, we are Australians. I did say in this chamber, when asked questions prior to the referendum, you know, people bring to this campaign, bring to these questions their history and their experience, and there is a place for respecting that, for speaking with respect and acceptance and some graciousness towards each other. I think now is a time for graciousness. Now is a time to recognise those that are hurting, even if we don't agree with what they might say. Now is a time to recognise that all of us have a role in bringing Australians together. So what I'd say to you is we come to this with that spirit, and I would invite you and others on that side to respond in kind.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Little, first supplementary.
Almost always and with everything, the most vulnerable are affected the most. the Albanese government spent $450 million on a referendum doomed to fail. This could have doubled annual funding for child and family services in the Northern Territory, where notifications of harm to children continue to go up, not down. Why do you continue to oppose an audit into Indigenous program funding and a Royal Commission into child sexual abuse in Indigenous communities, when in the Northern Territory the torment and trauma of
Senator
those
Little,
children at
the
risk
time for answering
is often
expired.
silenced?
Minister. Finish. I'm happy for you
Senator
to
Little,
finish.
do you want to finish your question? The minister's invited you to do so.
Yes. Thank you. Appreciate that. So, in the Northern Territory, the trauma and torment of those children at risk or who have already been harmed is often silenced, but is definitely not invisible.
Thank you, Senator Little. Minister Wong.
I think we would all agree we should all work, well, all of us want children to be healthy and safe, and no one seeks that abuse is ever invisible. I would first, I think you opened with your question about doomed to failure. You would know, Senator Little, that your party, for quite some time, until the decision earlier this year, supported this process. Mr Wyatt supported this process. Mr Morrison, Mr Turnbull were engaged in this process. Until recently, this did have bipartisan support. Well, hey. Order. People have a democratic right to change their view. In relation to the second question, the safety and well-being of First Nations children is a priority for us. There is a lot of work being undertaken.
Senator Little, second supplementary.
Has the Prime Minister or Minister Burney read the Productivity Commission report on expenditure on children in the Northern Territory and the report of the Office of the NT Children's Commissioner, which clearly outlines the rising incidence of harm and notification for children? What is your answer to changing the lives of families and their children in the Northern Territory, and what evidence are you relying on to say no to an audit and a Royal Commission?
Thank you, Senator Little. Minister Wong.
Well, first, as I answered yesterday, it is the case, and I think Senator Gallagher the day before on a similar question, that the National Audit Office did find previous compliance systems were clearly deficient in the area of Indigenous affairs, and we agree that strong governance and accountability are vital to delivering high-quality services and better outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, which is what we all want. As Senator Gallagher told the chamber on Monday, I believe, and I repeated again yesterday, the NIAA has agreed to all recommendations by the Auditor-General and is in the process of implementing them. I also can advise the Minister has asked the agency to establish an integrity branch to protect and detect fraud and compliance issues. We may disagree on the how, but all of us want the gap closed. All of us want better outcomes. What I would say, and I would invite Senator Little,
Thank you, Minister.
we would prefer this were done in a non-partisan.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Communications, Senator Watt. Former Special Forces Commando Heston Russell repeatedly asked for a correction and an apology for stories the ABC published that defamed him and November Platoon, accusing them of committing war crimes in Afghanistan at a time when they weren't even in that country. He offered to settle the case for $99,000, which the ABC refused and proceeded to trial. The defamatory articles were brought to the attention of Minister Rowland, the Minister for Communications, by a 26,000-signature petition which she acknowledged on 20th of March and on which she failed to act. Minister, what is the cost to the taxpayer for the ABC's legal fees in this matter so far?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Roberts, for that question. I'll have to take on notice the exact details of that question that you've asked for, and presumably these are matters that you'd also have the opportunity to ask the ABC at estimates next week. So happy to come back to you with any details that I can provide on that. Of course, the broader issue around any defamation action taken against the ABC is really a matter for ABC management. Of course, this government believes in the independence of the ABC and, in particular, its editorial independence. Senator Rennick, on the other hand, thinks that it's a biased organisation. That's a very disappointing remark to make about the national broadcaster, but perhaps one we're used to after years of ABC cuts under the former government. It would appear that Senator Rennick is not the only member of the opposition who regards the ABC as biased. Again, very disappointing view to express about the national broadcaster, the only publicly funded broadcaster. And again, it probably indicates why the ABC suffered such severe funding cuts under the former government. So, Senator Roberts, you'll obviously have the opportunity to ask those questions of ABC management at estimates next week, something that you and I know Senator Henderson always has questions for the ABC as well, so she'll no doubt do that again next week as well. Sorry, Senator Ruston, we get to answer the questions. So
Minister Watt.
I've already said.
Minister Watt, order, order, order across the chamber, order. And Minister Watt, please refer to me when you're answering the question. Senator Henderson.
Just on indulgence.
No, Senator Henderson, resume your seat. Minister, please continue. Have you finished your answer?
Well, I actually answered the question in the first 5 seconds by saying that I'd take those details on notice, but I'm obviously able to then comment on the question more broadly, and that's what I've spent 1 minute and 55 seconds doing.
Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Thank you. The judge in this trial was scathing of ABC journalists involved in the case, saying they became defensive and considered any criticism merely part of a culture war attack, and this inhibited, quote, a proper remedial response to criticism. The ABC journalists thought they were part of a culture war, and that prevented them from acting impartially and reasonably, leading to a potential multi-million-dollar bill to taxpayers. Minister, what consequences will the journalists involved face for eroding people's trust in the ABC, and why hasn't their employment already been terminated?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Watt.
Well, Senator Roberts, I'm pleased to inform you that Australia now has a government that doesn't have political interference in the ABC. And so we have no intention of repeating the sort of intervention that we've seen from some of the people who are yelling across the chamber now in matters involving the ABC. These are matters that are the responsibility of ABC management, and we respect their independence. I understand, Senator Roberts, that the federal court has obviously handed down its decision in these defamation proceedings. There do remain several settlement matters before the court, so I probably shouldn't be commenting any further on what might happen there. And as I've said, the ABC is responsible for managing its legal matters, including defamation claims and litigation, just as any media proprietor, whether it be publicly funded or privately owned, is responsible for managing its legal matters, including when it's sued for defamation. We believe that the ABC is a trusted source of news, information and entertainment for all Australians, and we support it.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, Heston Russell was a victim of disinformation published by the ABC in an ordeal that he has called the hardest battle he has ever fought. Can you please confirm that Minister Rowland's misinformation and disinformation bill would not cover the ABC and won't protect people like Heston Russell from government disinformation?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Watt.
Well, Senator Roberts, I'm very pleased that you've taken an interest in matters involving misinformation and disinformation. I welcome your sudden interest in misinformation and disinformation, and I hope that that's something that you will retain an interest in when it comes to election campaigns that you're involved in, Senator Roberts. I really do hope that you do that. We'd like to hear a bit more about that. And Senator Canavan, he's a big fan of misinformation and disinformation as well. So I look forward to Senator Canavan supporting us in tackling misinformation and disinformation as well. Senator Rennick, we've got everyone. We've got all the kings of misinformation and disinformation up commenting today. Hello, Jared. How are you? Of course, the government does have legislation before the parliament to deal with misinformation and disinformation. We think that it is an important issue in today's media environment, particularly in the social media environment that we're operating under, and we think that it's an important piece of legislation to deal with.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sheldon.
Yeah, thanks, mate. My question is to the Minister for Emergency Management, Senator Watt, on a very serious subject. Minister, currently my state of New South Wales is being impacted by around 50 fires that are burning at advice level. In the past 4 weeks, we've seen significant fire activity across New South Wales, Queensland, Northern Territory and Western Australia. And in Victoria, we saw concurrent fires and floods. Can the Minister please advise the Senate on what the Commonwealth is doing to support these communities?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Sheldon, for your ongoing interest in these issues. Can I start by acknowledging that there are a number of fires currently burning at advice level in New South Wales, and of course there are also bushfires underway in Queensland and the Northern Territory as well. In terms of the New South Wales fires, Senator Sheldon, while at this stage there is no immediate threat to communities, it is important that people who live in the vicinity of those fires monitor the New South Wales Rural Fire Services website or Hazards Near Me app in case there is a change in conditions. I've seen some weather forecasts for the next week which indicate quite a lot of hot and windy weather coming across the continent, so we all do really need to stay aware of conditions in our local communities. In addition, as you would have seen this week, we received the very sad confirmation that a man died in a fire near Kempsey in New South Wales. And while investigations are continuing into the circumstances surrounding that incident, I'd of course like to send our deepest condolences to that man's family, friends and to his community. That death is a stark reminder of the types of fast-moving and erratic fires we are expecting to see this fire season, and I really do ask everyone to have a plan in place in advance of fires and wherever possible to avoid bushfire risk areas on days of catastrophic fire risk. In addition, earlier this month we saw fires in the Bega Valley which impacted on 4 homes, and at the very same time we saw in Victoria severe weather and flooding occurring in Gippsland. The Commonwealth has worked with the New South Wales and Victorian governments to activate support for those incidents through our disaster recovery funding arrangements. In New South Wales, assistance has been made available in the Bega Valley Shire for eligible people who need assistance following those events. There is essential financial assistance made possible, concessional interest rate loans, and in Victoria assistance has been made available in addition as well.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
I thank the Minister for the update. I'm sure the Senate also sends their condolences to the family of that Kempsey man who lost his life. While fires and floods have already begun impacting Australia, we know that the season has only just begun. What work has the Commonwealth undertaken to ensure that we are prepared for the natural disaster season?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. The Albanese government is highly cognisant of the increased level of risk facing communities across the country in the upcoming high-risk weather season. We are continuing to support those communities who are still recovering from 2 years of successive record-breaking floods, but we've also been preparing for the drying conditions that we're now seeing from El Niño and the switchback that is causing to dry and hot conditions this summer. The Albanese government, through the National Emergency Management Authority, in fact began preparations for the coming disaster season before the last disaster season had even finished, because we knew we were going to be facing difficult conditions this summer. And since then, NEMA has been pressing ahead with an expanded high-risk weather season preparedness program, which has included a disaster recovery funding arrangements roadshow focused on informing and supporting disaster-impacted local governments. And late last month, we also held the inaugural high-risk weather season summit here at Parliament House, and I thank all of those who attended.
Senator Sheldon, second supplementary.
Now, Minister, we know that Australia will face longer and more intense natural disaster seasons due to climate change, and many of us in this room have experienced those consequences in our home states. What work is the Commonwealth undertaking to build a more resilient Australia and ensure that we are prepared for future challenges?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator Sheldon. Well, of course, the Albanese government is tackling the root cause of increasing extreme weather, being climate change, by legislating much more ambitious emission reduction targets than we saw previously and doubling our renewable energy projects. Because unlike those opposite, we accept the science of climate change. This week, I met with bushfire survivors. It's really sad that in 2023 there are some members of the opposition who still don't accept the science of climate change, but there they are. Even when we're talking about bushfires, you reject the science of climate change. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And this man this is the man who was supported in his pre-selection by the opposition leader, Peter Dutton.
Senator Watt, I remind you to direct your answers to the chair and invite you to finish.
Unbelievable. And now Senator Canavan's chiming in about the science of climate change when we're talking about bushfires. This week I met with bushfire survivors for climate action, people who lost their homes and lost their properties from climate change-induced bushfires.
Thank you,
it's
Minister.
a real shame that more of you don't take the effort to do it.
It's still second. Senator Roberts, second supplementary. No, you've finished. Sorry, you were right, Senator Hume. My apologies.
Madam President, my question is to the Minister for Trade and Tourism, Senator Farrell. Minister, is it correct that you instructed Austrade to overturn a merits-based selection process for Australia's Consul General and Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner in San Francisco that had already been completed and recommended the appointment of a highly skilled trade expert, Ms Kirsten Thompson, to fill that role?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Hume, for her question. Look, I'm a little bit surprised that this question is being asked at this time, given that the announcement in respect of former Senator Ketter was made some months ago, and we very publicly announced that the vacancy that had been occurring at San Francisco was going to be filled by Mr. Ketter. We have followed all of the usual processes. All of the usual. Well, you might not like this, Senator Canavan, but we have followed all of the usual processes that apply in terms of the selection of people who represent us in these missions overseas. I'm very comfortable, I have to say, with the appointment of Mr. Ketter.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham.
Thank you, President. Point of order on direct relevance. Senator Hume's question did not raise Mr. Ketter at all. Her question went specifically to the merits-based process that had led to the selection, apparently, of Ms Kirsten Thompson, a fact that had not been made public, notwithstanding the minister's insinuations, and whether or not it is correct that he had overturned that process. I ask you to draw him to the detailed part of the question, which is clearly about the merits-based selection process that was undertaken.
Senator Wong.
President, on the point of order, the minister clearly was responding to the appointment, which was the nub of the question, and I put to you that he was being directly relevant in accordance with the standing orders.
I do believe the minister was being relevant to the question because it did go to the nature of overturning what was alleged to have been a decision. But I will listen carefully to the minister's continued answer, and if he strays from the question, I'll draw his attention to that. Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. The government, when they're making these sorts of appointments, and me in particular, considers a number of factors where there is a clear advantage to be represented by people who've had distinguished careers beyond the public service, such as business people and former parliamentarians. I'd note that that was frequently done by the former government. That's the process. That's the process.
Minister Farrell. Senator Hugh.
Point of order. The question was specifically about whether the minister overturned a merits-based process.
And the minister is being relevant to the question.
He did not answer that question. He has not answered that question.
Senator Hume, there is ample opportunity after this in Take Note to pursue your point of view, but the minister is being relevant. He's talking about the selection process and the reason for the decision. I am listening carefully, and if there is a deviation from the question, I will remind him and draw him back to it. Thank you. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. I followed the usual processes which apply in respect of these sorts of appointments.
Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, when did you advise Austrade of your intention to overturn the process? Had Ms Thompson already been advised of her selection at that time? And if so, how long after her selection was she advised that you had overturned the process?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Well, my understanding was that Ms Thompson made an application for a number of positions, and of course she's now representing Australia, or about to represent Australia in Singapore, and I'm very confident that she will do a terrific job in that regard. All of these processes were conducted in the proper way. I made a decision based on what I thought was in the best interests of Australia in its San Francisco mission.
Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. As a result of overturning the merits-based process following the selection and notification of a preferred candidate, has Austrade had to provide an alternative opportunity to Ms Thompson to avoid paying compensation for ministerial cancellation of that merits-based process? And is it true that Ms Thompson even had to train her replacement, Senator Farrell's former union and Senate colleague, Chris Ketter?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Well, can I say Ms Thompson will be a wonderful representative, like so many hard-working members of Austrade.
Thank you, Senator Farrell. Senator Hume.
Chris Ketter is going to be, I just want the question answered.
I will remind the minister of the question. Senator Hume. Senator Farrell.
I've answered your question. I've answered your question, Senator Hume.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Birmingham.
President, it is not directly relevant for a minister just to say I've answered the question when the question has so blatantly not been answered. It was a very clear question about whether or not Ms Thompson had to be offered an alternative role to avoid compensation payments. Senator Farrell has not come remotely close to answering that question.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Senator Wong.
I would make the point that my recollection is in a previous answer, in fact, there was a reference to which appointment had been made. But I make the point, if Senator Birmingham is correct and reference to a previous answer is not appropriate, there'd be a lot of former ministers on that side who did not comply with that order for many years. So I submit to you that I'll take the interjection from Senator Cash, who has
Senator Wong. Senator Wong.
She seems to think
Senator Wong,
pointing
you're on
out
a point of order.
How they behave.
Please resume your seat. Order. Order. I will remind senators that interjections are disorderly. Senator Cash, I've just reminded the Senator Wong. Senator Wong and Senator Cash, order. Order. I have just reminded the Senate that interjections are disorderly. Senator McKenzie, in relation to your point of order, Senator Birmingham, just before you rose, I did remind the senator of the question, and he has given a response that he believes, from recollection, that he followed all processes. Minister.
Thank you, President. As I said, Ms Thompson has been appointed to a position which I understand she applied for, and will do a fantastic job, and will do a fantastic job representing Australia as all of the Austrade workers do.
Minister Wong.
Thank you. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.